One of the difficulties of being the manager here and running tours is I notice every cobweb. So there's, of course, in a place like this that's more than 100 years old, there's a lot of cobwebs. And I can't get to them all, but believe me, I see every single one of them.
My name is Eric Peterson. I am the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Waterworks Museum. I've always been a history lover my whole life. I grew up in Lexington, of course, which is a very historical town. I happened to move away and live in San Francisco, where I learned about how dry things can be and how water is important. And I was a graduate student at Harvard's Museum Studies program and Extension program. And I answered an advertisement asking somebody to come to a museum that hadn't been built yet. So that was in 2009, before this beautiful building was turned into a museum. We are located in the Chestnut Hill High Surface Pumping Station. So this is the original pumping station for the city of Boston, built in the 1880s. And so we use this building and its incredible contents, which we'll see in a little bit, to tell the story of the growth of the city of Boston and how water was an essential aspect of that growth. How infrastructure is such a critical part of cities today, and that's certainly something we get into. So we come at our subject in all different directions. We have a whole section about public health. This building was actually very important for that in Boston's history. We talk about architecture. Of course, we have an incredible structure to be in to talk about that. We talk about steam technology. We have enormous steam-powered pumping engines, and they're all pretty much intact, so you can really learn a lot about that. We talk about the golden age of Boston between the Civil War and the First World War, and how incredibly vibrant the city was and was willing to spend for its residents. And then again, we talk about the many troubles that Boston had in terms of struggling to figure out how to deal with enormous changes in the city, the growth of the city, population growth, and mostly how to get water out to people, clean, safe drinking water out to people. This was the central pumping station for the city of Boston. So we're located right across from the reservoir, and all this building ever did was take that water from the reservoir and using the giant equipment here, all of which is steam powered, fired by coal, pushing that water up to another reservoir a little ways away, about a mile away from us. And then from there, it went down by gravity to supply water to the city of Boston, mostly to the higher elevations around the city of Boston. So the reason why this station was necessary was because Boston had annexed many of the little hamlets and villages around the city of Boston. Prior to that, for the 100 years before that, Boston, all they had to do was get water through gravity down into the lower areas where people lived. But when we acquired all this new territory, they had to be able to get water up. So that's what the station did. It pumped water up to a higher location. And really all it does is store coal that gets stored in the far end of the building. And it boils water with that coal, and that happens underneath the big smokestack. And then in the engine room is where the pumps take that water and push it up to another reservoir, and then have it go by gravity to those other areas. So very simple. Well, I think our story goes back to the very first water supply Boston had, and that was actually in 1848 when the Cochituate aqueduct was built, and that tapped into the Cochituate, Lake Cochituate out in Natick. And in 1848, that water was brought in, and the city of Boston had its first water supply. That worked great for a while, but the city grew really quickly, and also there was concern that that water supply was too far away. That was about 16 miles away from the city of Boston. So Boston decided in 1870 to have a central reservoir nearer the city, so in the event of any accidents, the water would be right there. There was a water break, or a water main failure, and that reservoir had to be accessed, and it did. It worked. So some of the machinery here is still operational and still does work. It wasn't the pumps here in the building, but it was right nearby, a modern underground station. And that activated the water supply so that people in Boston could get the water from this reservoir. So everything is still ready to go and operational, but it just waits there for a massive emergency.
So this is our Levitt engine. This is one of the 3 engines we have in our museum here. Engine number 3. And this is a great vantage point. Some of the things you can see up there, for example, is the beautiful walnut cladding around the pistons. This is typical of that era. The craftsmanship and artistry are really awesome on this machine. And you can also see this wonderful ship's wheel, which was a unique part of Levitt's signature.
The 2 original pumping machines, one in the lobby and one a little ways down, were supplied when the building was built. And it was thought that those would work perfectly well for the next 100 years or so. They were very new and very powerful for the time. But it turned out very quickly that even though they were high-tech equipment, it was not enough capacity to meet the needs of the city of Boston. And that was because so many people were coming. So that's when this engine number 3 was put into place. So they hired a guy that happened to have an office in Cambridge, and he just happened to be the world's foremost steam engineer that we totally don't remember today. Nobody really remembers his name. We certainly remember him here. I personally remember the guy. His name was Erasmus Darwin Levitt Jr. With a long name like that, you'd think you'd remember him, but maybe because it's long, we forget him. But either way, he's not known very well, and so it's really our aim to try to have people learn about him, because he was a fascinating person. And he was able to build a gigantic steam engine here while those other 2 little engines were pumping away furiously, and get it happening within 2 years and actually operating. So it was a real engineering feat, the kind of thing that in his generation would be remembered. You remember those guys that do a lot of talking about themselves, or if, say, a family member or somebody remembers them and writes a biography or something like that. There's nothing like that for this guy, so there's very little material. All there is sort of the remnants of what he did.
This is one of our most important objects here at the Waterworks Museum, and it's actually a National Historic Engineering Landmark, which got that designation in 1973, and there are not that many things that have that kind of designation, so this is a big deal. If you're an engineer, this is where you come. This is an engineer of the ultimate kind of engineer, I guess. He didn't want to make money. He didn't want to get famous. He just wanted to solve a problem. We're going to the collection storage area. This is where we keep all our tools and equipment we received from the very beginning. These are all original pieces of equipment. Oil cans, heavy industry stuff. And what's cool is everything here has a mark on it of the manufacturer, so you can really do some tracing back and figuring out when it was made, what it was used for, any of that history that's necessary for all the companies that worked around the Waterworks Museum.
So what we do here is absolutely essential for the city of Boston. Of course, we talk about the history of Boston. We want to be the center of the conversation about water. We have many, many school groups that come into our museum, and they do programs that we provide that teach them all kinds of things about water, whether it's about the safety of water and how to filter water, or it can be about how water was shared. It's everything you ever wanted to know about water, about the past and how it's connected to Boston, but also about water today. So we often talk about global warming. We talk about the scarcity of water in many other places. We really want students, especially from Massachusetts, to understand how incredibly lucky we are to have an excellent water system and access to water all the time. And if we can have that conversation, then we're doing our job as a history museum. And that part makes it very exciting, because nobody likes an old, dusty old history museum. You know, you need to have it some connection to your real life and what matters to you. And there is here.
chain.
Okay.
But I don't have any more anchors.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'm seeing the camera move. Has that been moving back and forth all this time?
Yeah.
Oh, it has. Okay.
Yeah. I might leave that in too.